Hey, welcome to this week's live cast. This is Jamie from Stonemaier Games, and I'm putting my regular sticky note on my screen so I know the topics that I'm going to talk about today. I have a few adjustments. I don't know if you've seen the last few weeks. I have a new camera, so I've been using that. I've also been trying to get rid of a certain high-pitched sound that my mic is making. This is my mic. And so I've tried to take some advice from various YouTube channels that have suggestions about it. And hopefully it's making a difference. I don't know if you can tell here or if it's more of a YouTube thing, but either way, feel free to let me know in the comments if it is making a difference. If not, and you're watching on YouTube, just turn the volume down. It's hard to see. It's hard to hear when you turn the volume way up, or it's easy to hear when you turn the volume way up. What's going on today? It looks like Joe, my co-worker, is joining us today. So if you ever have questions for Joe, feel free to throw them out to me, and I'll prompt Joe, and he might be able to answer them in the comments. But otherwise, let's jump right in. Let's do chocolate of the day. Why not? So I got this as a Christmas present. I think my manufacturer sent me this. I don't actually know who sent this to me, but it's a fancy Peruvian chocolate, Peru dark chocolate, 70% cacao, and it's called French Broad Chocolate, handcrafted in Asheville. Okay, so it's Peruvian cocoa beans, but made in Asheville, North Carolina. And it's delicious. It's really, really good. I've eaten about half of the bar. It looks like this, and I'll keep on munching away at that. Really, really good. What's your treat of the day? Your desk treat, your desk snack of the day. Carol notes that she's only heard this out on YouTube videos, and that is really weird. The same thing. I've wondered. I don't know why that is, Carol, because I've heard the same thing that on Facebook it's fine, but the sound appears on YouTube somehow. So it's something about the video going on YouTube. I'm not sure what that is. Matt says, is there any mechanism or game type you have no ambition in tackling? There's certainly many mechanisms that I'm more interested in exploring and some that I'm less interested in exploring. Any that I'm not interested at all. I don't know if there probably are mechanisms that I'm just not, I don't do a lot of direct combat. I don't do take that. I'm just not. I don't have fun playing those games typically. There are exceptions. And there's a video, actually, Matt, you might check it out. The kind of an answer to this might be, there's a video that I did about exceptions to my gaming rules. And so there are game mechanisms and some mechanisms, some themes that I don't usually enjoy. And I talk about games in which I do enjoy those mechanisms. So even those mechanisms aren't off limits. Today is the last day. So I'll back up a little bit because this started after last week's live cast, in case you only pay attention to these live casts. We decided, kind of at the spur of the moment, to help out with a serendipitous link to a charitable effort. Basically, as you probably know, Australia is really, really suffering right now. Certain parts of Australia are suffering from wildfires. And it's estimated that 1 billion animals have died in those wildfires, and a number more have been displaced and are being taken care of. And it just so happened, we had the information that it just so happened that the next expansion for Wingspan was going to be, or is going to be, set in Oceania, so the region that Australia and New Zealand are in. And we knew that information, but usually we wouldn't reveal that information until we had actually finished making this expansion and produced it. We're ready to sell it. But it was just this coincidence that we have this terrible thing happening right now, and we have this expansion that's coming out hopefully later this year. And we thought, rather than wait, let's just announce it now and use the visibility that Wingspan has to make a positive impact. And so basically what we did is, I set up a MailChimp sign-up form for anyone who wants to be notified when we do launch pre-orders for the expansion much, much later, many, many months in the future. That's when we'll talk more about the expansion. So then until then, I'm not really talking about it. I'm just revealing the location. And for everyone who signs up, tomorrow morning, I'm going to donate $1 for every person to a major charity in Australia that's supporting a variety of different regions, the wildlife efforts in those regions, called WIRES. So there's no cost to you to do this. It's purely a donation that Stonemaier Games is going to make. All you have to do, if you're interested in knowing about the expansion and in contributing through your email address to this effort, is go to, I'll put a link in the comments below. Go to the link that I just posted in the comments. It's on our website under Wingspan Oceania expansion, and enter your email address. So far, we are up to, the last count was 7,242 signups, and so 7,242 US dollars, which I think the conversion rate is actually pretty good for Australia. So that might be upwards of like around 9,000 Australia dollars right now. Anyway, talked about that long enough, but it's something that we're trying to do our part to help out, basically. I know there are a lot of terrible things that happen in the world all the time, but it was just this weird coincidence that we had this expansion, and this thing is happening in the region that that expansion is based in. I'm looking over the comments here, and I see that Andrew Bosley, the illustrator for Tapestry, is joining us. And Andrew, actually, I think you have a game that you illustrated on Kickstarter right now, right? Jurassic Parts. I think Andrew did the illustrations for that too. So Andrew, thanks for joining us. Maybe if someone has a question for Andrew, you could ask in the comments. George has a question for Tapestry. George, I won't go into that too deeply here, but feel free to ask that in the Tapestry group or on Board Game Geek. Joe can help out with that. Rob says, is Scythe still available through game distributors? I'm having trouble ordering to keep it in stock. Yeah. I mean, we have it in stock now, and unless there's a delay in actually getting it to distributors, or unless your distributors aren't ordering it, it should be available. Yeah, we're definitely still making it, definitely still available for distributors. Carol says, how did you like Maracaibo? She saw that I played it. I've been curious with all the positive reviews. Yeah, thanks for asking about that, Carol. I'll delve into some of the games that I played recently. Maracaibo, I played Clank Legacy on Monday. Before that, the most recent game I played was Maracaibo. This is from Alexander Pfister, a fairly heavy Euro game. I say fairly because it's not super complex. There are lots of interesting decisions, but the complexity really comes from the sheer number of icons looking at you in the face at all times in the game. There's so many icons in the game, and that adds, I think, some level of heaviness and weight and complexity to the game. But Alexander Pfister is one of my favorite designers. I was really excited about this game, and I enjoyed my first play of it. I like games that have kind of one-way time tracks, and in this game, you're sailing around the Caribbean, and you're sailing between 1 and 7 spaces, and you're deciding how far you want to go before you stop and take the action. And I really like that decision point. Do you want to just go a few spaces and claim something? Do you want to go a number of spaces? And there's not blocking other players, but there's some certain things that you want to get to, quests that you want to get to before another player. And there's also this whole other linear track where you are kind of exploring and getting points and different benefits on a more linear track. I love tracks in games. It has multi-use cards, which I generally like. And in this game, it's information overload at times with those multi-use cards. But over the course of the game, it stopped being an issue, really, because I was used to what I was doing. And it's a game of plenty. You are constantly getting more cards that you can use, and you're not really spending anything to get those cards. If you spend cards, you're just refilling your hand at the end of the turn from a common deck. So I like games that feel constantly rewarding, and this is definitely one of those games. I think it's worth a try, Carol. I don't know your exact game preferences, but definitely does not feel like a Stonemaier game in certain regards to the barrier to entry maybe for learning it. But if you get past that and you like a medium to heavyweight Euro game, I think it's certainly worth a try. I'll go back to comments in a second. Let me see some other games that I played recently. The other game that I played on Saturday was In the Hall of the Mountain King, which I heard a few people recommend to me, maybe here in some of these videos, and I was really pleasantly surprised. It's another medium to heavyweight Euro game with a Tetris-style mechanism where you're digging into this giant mountain and forming paths through this mountain using these Tetris pieces. But my favorite mechanism, I just mentioned this on a video yesterday, was in regards to this pyramid of trolls that you're building. And whenever you place a troll in this pyramid, you activate the benefit of that troll and all trolls below it, and it's very satisfying. So if you can imagine, early in the game, you have very few benefits that you're getting from those trolls, but at the end of the game, when you place that 10th troll at the top of your pyramid, you are getting 10 benefits all in one turn. And you're trying to do that so that you still have a few other turns to actually spend those benefits, those resources. but it's a very satisfying mechanism, really, really cool mechanism. And I really, really liked it. I also played Cartographers and Role Player. In fact, we did 2 games from Thunderworks games at game night last week. I had an itch to play Role Player. I was really excited to play it. So we played Role Player, and then we played Cartographers, which is set in the same universe. And tonight, I'm really, really excited to play Isle of Cats. Joe is bringing that to play tonight to game night. I'm sure many people are going to be excited about that, so we might have to take turns playing it, but I definitely want to play it tonight. I'm super excited to play that. I'm curious if anyone else has gotten their Kickstarter copy of Isle of Cats and what you think about it. Amin says, how do I record and organize my playtesting notes and observations given the huge number of playtests you conduct? Well, I mean, fortunately, a lot of them, for local playtests, I just take notes by hand and I usually just incorporate them. I don't really have a tracking system other than older versions of the files, but I don't really track my notes. Maybe I should, but I don't. But for a blind playtesting, all of that information is entered into a Google form, which just a giant Google spreadsheet. So I can look back at past comments, past data if I want to. And it's also, anecdotal feedback is also sent to me in emails and Word documents, which I save in certain folders. But the Google Doc is the main place, and that's really, really helpful to keep that information all in one place. Renee says, have I played Imperial Settlers, Empires of the North? I think it's a good choice for a 2-player game, and also each deck is really different from each other. Yeah, I haven't played it, but I love that in the Imperial Settlers world that each deck is unique. I played Imperial Settlers once, but I haven't played Empires of the North. Tang says, can I tell us anything about the My Little Scythe expansion? I think the main thing I can tell you right now is that I was hoping to announce it next Wednesday, but due to something that came up, I'll no longer be doing that. It will be another month or 2 before I announce it. So I appreciate your enthusiasm and your curiosity, but it will be a little bit more time before I start talking about it. Sean says, have I ever thought about making a mini game, 15 to 30 minute small box game? Not really. I mean, it kind of goes against, it doesn't necessarily go against the Stonemaier Games philosophy, but one of our core things is that there needs to be a component hook in the game, some component that you are really excited to put on the table, and generally that doesn't mean a tiny component. Also, we generally look for event games, or we do look for event games. We're not looking for fillers. I love playing fillers, but it's just not what we do as a publisher. So we're not looking for a 15 or 30 minute game, basically. We're looking for a 45 to 90 minute game, the event game, the main meat of a game night. Yeah, so kind of no. That's not up our alley, but it doesn't mean that I don't love those games. I do love playing those games. Joshua says he's taken a day off work next week to play Scythe, Rising Sun, and Western Legends. That'll be a fun day of gaming. Curious, with you working on a sandbox game yourself, what do I think about Western Legends? It'll be our first play of it. Yeah, I've played it, I believe, twice, and I love the use of the poker cards. In fact, in that game and Root, I love the use of a common deck where the cards really aren't that complicated in that deck, but they're used in very different ways throughout the game. As for the sandboxy elements of Western Legends, yeah, I thought it was fun that you could kind of do whatever you want and generally have a way to win. I think that's cool. I think it's a little easier to do in a cooperative game than a competitive game to have those sandbox elements, but Western Legends generally pulls it off. I'm curious to hear your thoughts after you play it, specifically in the sandbox realm. In fact, maybe I should do a top 10 video about sandbox games where you can kind of do whatever you want. What are some thoughts about that in the comments here? Just name some sandbox games where you feel like you have not just a number of ways to win, but also just a number of completely different things to do on your turn. I have a feeling that a lot of games can fit into this category, so I'm going to have to find some way to narrow it down. I wonder if it's an official mechanism or category on BGG. I'll check that out. Sandbox games. Make a note about that. Sandbox. Cody's joining us for the first time in a while. Cody's one of my favorite people to ask questions in the comments here. Cody's good to have you back. Thanks for joining us. Ernani says, have I seen that Scythe was first and Wingspan was third on Dice Tower's People's Choice Top 100 Games of All Time? I didn't see that. That's really cool. Yeah, thank you for sharing it. I had no idea. That's awesome. Wow, Silent was number 1. That's incredible. Let's see. Sean says, I've played a couple one versus many games recently. I've enjoyed them and wondered if I have any thoughts about them. I love your thoughts and recommendations. Thanks, Sean. One versus many. Well, my favorite is Scotland Yard. I love Scotland Yard. It's so simple, so streamlined, and that is definitely my favorite one versus many game. I'm trying to think if I have a video on this. I don't know if I do. Other one versus many games. Because a lot of them seem to fit into that hidden movement category. I mean, that one is probably so far above anything else on the list that because I'm thinking of games like Imperial Assault, other hidden movement games, but Scotland Yard is just, in my opinion, the best of all of them in terms of how much I like it. So that would be my number 1 if you have the chance to try it. And what are the other ones that you played recently, Sean? I'm curious about. I can mention my thoughts on any games that you named in that category. Isaac says, if I had the chance to play On Mars yet, almost, Isaac. It was between that and a few other games on Saturday, but I ended up going with Maracaibo and In the Hall of the Mountain King. But I will play it soon. I promised a friend that I'm going to give it a try. Daniel says, as a publisher designer, in what kind of space or frame of mind do I find myself at my best in terms of creativity? That's a good question. Usually I'm at my best, at least in the brainstorming stage, if I definitely don't have a computer on. And lately it's been that I go to a coffee shop. I physically move away from a computer so I cannot revert back to the computer. But ideally it would be an empty coffee shop because I don't really want the distractions of anyone else around me. People are distracting too. I work in silence. I don't listen to any music or anything when I work. So I kind of like no people around, silence, no computer would be my ideal creative space. Although I do a lot of the creative work I do is also in InDesign as I'm creating prototypes. So sometimes I just need to have the computer on, and that's still satisfying in any creative way. And I'm actually creating something rather than just brainstorming ideas. But in terms of triggering my imagination and creating hypothetical concepts and ideas, the silent, away from people, away from computer are the things that I enjoy the most. And that works for me the best. What else is going on here? Mark says, with all the games that you roll out, do I have a dedicated group of playtesters to help me keep the game secret? Fortunately, Mark, I'm lucky that our playtesters are really good. Our lead playtesters are really good at keeping information secret and really good at communicating that to their playtesters, because every degree of separation for me is, I think, an increased chance that someone will just talk about a game that shouldn't be talked about yet. But our lead playtesters are really good at that. So I do have a dedicated group of lead playtesters who we've carefully vetted. Many of them we've worked with in the past, and they're very good at keeping the game secret. What are some other topics of today? I watched a bunch of movies over the weekend. I watched The Aeronauts on Amazon Prime. I watched The Hustle. I watched Brittany Runs a Marathon. And my favorite of the bunch, which was not a comedy at all, was a movie called Game Changers, which talked about the impact of some of the negative impacts that meat has on our bodies and the positive impacts of a plant-based diet. I've kind of been moving towards a more plant-based diet, not vegan, but more vegetarian over the last year, where most of the meals I eat do not include meat, but they do include often. The exceptions for that are chicken and fish. I do eat chicken and fish, usually maybe 3 to 4 times a week. But after watching this documentary, I think I'm going to keep on moving further away and eat meat very sparingly and mostly focus on healthy vegetables. And most vegetables are healthy. That's a bit of an oxymoron there. So I'm curious if you all have any favorite dishes that do not include meat, that are very filling, that have plenty of protein in them, and make you feel really good afterward after you eat them. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments about that, because that's definitely something that I'm exploring more than I ever had in the past. And I have explored it a fair amount in the past too, so that's saying something at this point. Asar says, if there's one thing that I could have more of, what would it be and why? Time. always time. I always want more time. Let's see here. Here mentions that Tiny Epic Western is poker done right in a board game. Yeah, I haven't played that one. I've only done the poker mini game in Western Legends, and I actually really enjoyed that mini game. In fact, the first time I played, that's all I did. I just went and played poker the whole game and had a good time with it. Chad mentions point salad games. Yeah, point salad are point salad games sandbox games. I think it depends on the game, but it is a hard and fuzzy line to draw there. Outer Rim. Isn't there a Firefly game that has some sandbox elements to it? I think Xayah. I think most people would say that Xayah is sandboxy. Vindication. Right? These are good suggestions in the comments here. Isaac says that Paladins of the West Kingdom is. I could see that. Western Legends. And we're also talking about one versus many games. Isaac mentioned Spectre Ops, Fury of Dracula. Yeah, I think those are fine. I'd still put Scotland Yard way above them for me. Cody says, have I been to any of the food halls in St. Louis? I did a while ago, but it's been a while. I don't think the one I went to is open now. So it's been a long time, Cody, since I've done that. I went to one in Chicago over Thanksgiving, an Italian-themed one that was really, really good. Just scrolling through comments here for those of you who are watching or listening. Connor says, fun question from Connor. If I were to become a dinosaur, which would I be? Clearly, a Stegosaurus. My last name is Stegmeyer, so I would be a Stegosaurus. Although I would want to fly too. I would want to be a flying Stegosaurus. What else is going on here? Recent blogs. I blogged on Monday about the charity thing that I discussed earlier in this live cast that we're doing for Australia. And I talked about BackerKit launch. A pretty cool feature that BackerKit has added that doesn't actually cost anything to sign up and use unless you want to start sending emails from it. It looked actually pretty awesome. I was pretty impressed with what they did, even as a non-Kickstarter creator. I also did a blog post last week about Return to the Dark Tower, which I was just kind of overwhelmed with how impressed I was with the project. One thing after another was just done so well. It actually came up originally in this live cast last week where people were talking about just different elements of it that they did really well. And I thought I did a full kind of case study about it in last week's blog entry. It looks like another famous artist has joined us here. Ian O'Toole is here, as well as Andrew Bosley. Ian, thanks for joining us today. Asar says, if I was able to live to the age of 90 and retain either the mind or body of a 30-year-old for the last 60 years of your life, which would you want? Ooh, probably the mind. Yeah, probably the mind. Benjamin says, do I plan to back Wonderlands War, Tinder Blocks, or the Parks expansion in February? Anything else on my radar? You know, I'm really not good anymore at keeping track of upcoming Kickstarter projects. So this is the first. I knew that Wonderlands War was coming, but I didn't know it was coming to Kickstarter. I haven't heard of Tinder Blocks, and I don't know anything about the Parks expansion. Of those, I would say Wonderlands War is probably the most likely one that I would back, but I would have to see the war-like elements. I don't play a lot of war combat games, but I do know that James's company does take that games really well. I've mentioned multiple times that Grim Forest is my favorite game with a take that element. Rick says, am I scared of the echo chamber effect within playtesters? I understand your degree of separation concept, though I feel like the more degree of separation, the less chance of echo chamber. Let me try to decipher this, Rick. I think, well, I'm not actually sure what you're saying. I think you're either saying that playtesters, types of playtesters that we've vetted are just going to give me the type of feedback that, actually, I don't know what you're saying, Rick. Can you be more clear? And I'm happy to answer it. But I do know that the playtesters that we have, the blind playtesters, give fantastic feedback. They are not trying to appease me in any way. They're not. They're there to offer, and they do a great job of offering very specific examples and feedback that that can often fly in the face of what I've been designing, and really has a significant impact when I consider that feedback. So I think that is maybe what you were talking about, Rick, but feel free to clarify. Steve says Merchants and Marauders. That's a sandbox game. I have played that once. Xia I've only played once, and it wasn't with the expansion. Sarah's another hypothetical question. Sarah's on fire today, and this question is literally on fire. My house containing everything you own catches fire. After saving my loved ones and pets, you have time to safely make a final dash to save any one item. What would it be and why? My computer's backed up remotely, so that should be fine. I probably already have my phone on me. I don't know. I have some important paperwork that, like things like birth certificates and things like that, that I probably need to grab. Yeah, I probably said that. Like the core essentials, I can replace pretty much everything, I think, in this, and if I really needed to. Tiny Epic Quest was mentioned as a sandbox game. If you're joining us late, someone mentioned sandbox games, and I'm trying to gather ideas for a list of potential sandbox games to discuss. Tiny Epic Quest. Joe mentions Feast for Odin. I can see that. There's lots of different things you can do in Feast for Odin. Impulse. Ian mentions Impulse. I don't think I have played Impulse. And now we're also have some vegetarian recipes here in the comments. Let's see. Let me jump back to my notes real quick before I go back to comments. Oh, I did a video about tug of war games the other day, which was really cool. I hadn't really thought too much about this mechanism until I played Watergate the other day and loved it. Loved the tug of war mechanism in Watergate. It has multiple things that you were tugging back and forth between you and the other player. And so I did a little video about it. I didn't have 10 games that I had played, but I did talk about 10 games in the video. And people kept mentioning Blitzkrieg and Churchill as tug of war games that I should try, and also Dogs of War. So I'm going to give those a try. If you like that tug of war mechanism, most commonly found in Seven Wonders Duel, if you like that, feel free to check out that video. And Stonemaier Games news. I haven't talked about much about what's going on with Stonemaier Games other than the charitable effort that we're doing for Australia. We've been doing lots of Tapestry expansion playtesting lately. So it's been really fun to get all that feedback and figure out how to use it, how to implement it, and which feedback to implement or not. So that's been fun to do. Ernani says that I mentioned that Maracaibo was a little bit heavier than most of Stonemaier Games, and so is On Mars. Yeah, I haven't played On Mars yet, but I've heard it's very heavy. Do you believe the board game industry is shifting to heavier games? Also, do I think Stonemaier Games might shift a bit to this direction in the future as well? Well, depends on how easy they are to learn. I think accessibility is what's most important to me. The game needs to be accessible. So it could be a heavier game that's accessible. There are lighter games that aren't all that accessible because of certain elements. So the weight, I would say, is fairly flexible as long as it is accessible and playable in under 2 hours. I'm not looking to publish games that are 3 to 4 hours. Do I think the industry is shifting to heavier games? There's so many people in the industry now that no, I don't think so. I think maybe the Board Game Geek rankings are heavy game inclined, which is totally fine. But I think that's just the rankings are a very, very small subset of the sheer number of people who are buying and playing board games. Cody recommends a place called Strang Hall and Parlor in Kansas City. Yeah, cool. What's a dish there that you really like, Cody, that we should try out? Connor says, you are always asked about board games and publishing. Which other topic do I know the least about? Which topic? There's so many topics that I know nothing about at all. I don't know if I can answer that, Connor. There's like most other topics in the world are things that I know very little about. Chad says, using the name of a board game, how am I feeling today? That's an interesting challenge. How am I feeling today? I'm excited to play Isle of Cats today. And so if I'm excited about cats, I am, I don't know if there's a game name. What is a game name that is about excitement? I don't know. Offhand, I don't know a game that is about excitement. Steven says, am I excited for the Super Bowl? Oh, yes, Steven, thank you for mentioning this. My 49ers are going to the Super Bowl. And they're playing Kansas City Chiefs, which are just 4 hours away from St. Louis. Obviously, I'm rooting for the 49ers, but I just hope it'll be a good, entertaining game. And yeah, I'm definitely really excited about it. Cody says, how do I balance staving off creative block and going with the flow? If it happens, it happens, and you'll work with it. How do I balance staving off creative block? Creative block is not usually an issue for me because I jump around so much. Like usually I guess it's the same thing, but sometimes I am less excited about a certain game or a certain idea than other games, but then I'll shift to another one that I am excited about. So it's rare that I am not excited about anything that I'm working on. So it's just, the best answer I can have is that I usually have more than one project going at a time, and I'm usually excited about one of them, and I give myself permission to float between them based on the one that I'm most excited about at any given time. Nathaniel says, how do I organize my blind playtesting? Do I use local groups or outsource to a playtesting organization? So for local playtesting, I am there. I'm physically there leading the playtests. Those are usually friends, people in my game group, and my coworkers. For blind playtesting, they are people that have signed up as ambassadors for Stonemaier Games and have passed a very detailed test that they take to become a playtester. And usually they have to playtest one of our games and give me feedback. And I compensate them for it, but I also kind of use that as another test to see if I want to stick with them as a blind playtester. And so those are people around the world that are printing digital files that I'm sending them and playing with their local game groups in private. So they're to answer your question on how I find them, they are people that have signed up on our website to do that for us, and I compensate them for their time and their thoughts. Chad mentioned Seventh Continent as another sandbox game. Yeah, I agree with that. Any other sandbox games you all want to mention before we go here? Although I have 25 more minutes here, so plenty of time to mention other sandbox games for a potential video. Maybe not this week, but in the future. Daniel says, what mechanisms do you think we'll start seeing a revival of? He's hoping the spinner doesn't make a comeback, but he's open to it. What mechanisms do I think we'll start seeing a revival of? What have we seen recently that that kind of fell out of fashion for a while? Let me see my recent plays to see if I can notice any patterns here at all. Recent plays include the Maracaibo, Watergates, Double So Clever. I don't know. I think Roll and Write is in the midst of that because the original Roll and Write was the Yahtzee, right? And so now we're in the midst of a big Roll and Write revival. Those are the main ones that come to mind. That is the first one that comes to mind, at least. Chunk says he submitted a game called Peddler to my company, hoping we get to play it soon. Well, thank you, Chunk, for submitting that to us. Currently, we're not technically open for submissions, but the form is open, so I appreciate you submitting it. And if we do open submissions in the future, we'll be happy to look at it. Asar says, what's something that overwhelms you? What's something that overwhelms me? I mean, a thing that can stress me out, which I associate with being overwhelmed, is technology not working. If something should work and it just isn't working, that can be stressful and overwhelming for me. Cody says, In Between has a great tug-of-war feeling too. You know, I need to make a note of that, In Between, because a few people have mentioned that as well. In Between. Asar keeps coming with the great questions here. Asar says, what do I take for granted? I try not to take things for granted, but one big thing is I try not to take you're asking what I do take for granted. I'm going to say this in terms of I try not to, but sometimes I do, and that is that Stonemaier Games, that my company even exists, and that we have people that support us. Like I don't ever want to take that for granted, but sometimes I think in my tone, when someone's tone isn't very nice to me, sometimes I forget that they are a supporter of Stonemaier Games, so they wouldn't be contacting me if they weren't. And so that's something that I sometimes in the moment take for granted. Sarah also asked, how have my priorities changed over time? One of the big shifts was in the past year, where I since starting Stonemaier Games, I have not prioritized romantic relationships at all. I didn't pursue dating or girlfriends at all during my time running Stonemaier Games. Female friendships, yes, but not relationships. And that has changed with Megan. That's a big priority shift, where I still do prioritize my company, but I also balance that with being with Megan. So that's been a big priority shift in the last year. Mihir mentions Yokohama, Escape Plan, Trajan, Gugong, and Petrichor as sandbox games. Yeah, some great examples there. I'm going to write down a few of those. Yokohama. Thank you all for these suggestions. You're making the list for me. Trajan I can see too. I'm only going to list the ones I've actually played here. A few people, I was asking for a game that exemplifies that I'm excited to play Isle of Cats, and Matthew mentioned Cat Lady, and Melissa mentioned Happy Salmon. I like both of those. Asar says, what has been my biggest challenge in life, and how did I overcome it? My biggest challenge in life. That's a big weighty question. What is my biggest challenge in life? That one may have to wait. Sorry, let me think about that one. My biggest challenge in life, how did I overcome it? I feel like you've almost asked that before, and I said the same thing. I'll think about that and answer it in the future. That's a tough one. Let me think about that one. Biggest challenge and how do I overcome it? Maybe I'll do a personal blog entry about that. Biggest challenge, how overcome. It's my shorthand. Jesse says, I don't watch review videos of my games. I don't consume any reviews about my games. Do I still check the reviewers page to know their quality, style, and engagement? Oh, yes, because I don't watch it about our games, but I consume a ton of reviews, podcasts, video, written about other games, just not Stonemaier Games. Rick says, have I ever thought of sending, sorry, Rick, just trying to decipher the autocorrect here. Have I ever thought of sending by mail prototypes to random people for more feedback? I mean, that's essentially what we do for blind playtesters, yeah, but not by mail. It takes a long time to construct a prototype, so we send digital files. But to completely random people, no. I mean, I've learned early on, I would send a lot of playtest. I'd send it to just like anyone who was willing to playtest a game. But I learned that some people are not really good at offering feedback. Like it is a skill to be able to offer specific examples and focus on like what happened and how it made you feel. A lot of playtesters aren't good at doing that, and so I don't want to waste anyone's time. I don't want to waste my time. So it's a careful selection process to find people who are good at giving feedback. Not necessarily the feedback that I want, but they're just good at inherently the base foundation of giving feedback that is useful. Asar says, if I had to get a tattoo right now, what would it be? I don't know. I don't have any tattoos. And if I had to get one, maybe it would be something that would show some sort of family pride, maybe a family crest, and would be very, very small and hidden. George, let's see. Some more suggestions. Western Legends of Vindication as sandboxy games. Helena says, thanks so much for talking about the cascading production mechanism in the Hall of the Mountain King. Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, thank you for your comment on that video and on Twitter. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised by that game. Not that I thought it was going to be bad, but I just didn't know much about it. And then I played it and it was really, I had a lot of fun with it. A lot of fun with it. It actually says something because I love Tetris style, Tetris pieces in games. A Feast for Odin, Isle of Cats tonight. Patchwork, I love that. So it really says something that there was despite how much I loved that in the game, there was a mechanism that I loved even more in the Hall of the Mountain King. Cody says, any news on submissions for the Red Rising game? Yeah, Cody, it's been a while since I can't remember if I've mentioned this before, but we're currently not accepting submissions, and I might have something in the works internally. Depends on how certain things go. But currently we're just not accepting submissions for anything, Red Rising or otherwise. Annika has joined us. Annika is my cousin-in-law, maybe at this point, Annika. And that means that my niece, Maudie, is here. And Maudie, hi. This is Uncle Jamie if you're watching. Wave at the camera if you're there, Maudie. Maudie is my little niece. Matthew mentions Godtear is a mobile-style miniatures war game from Steamforge that has an awesome tug-of-war mechanism for battles. Ooh, I gotta check that out. Godtear combat mechanism. I could see tug-of-war working well for battles. Does I'm trying to. There's a Martin Wallace game, A Few Acres of Snow. It's been a long time since I played that, but it has like a siege mechanism that is kind of a tug-of-war mechanism. I wonder if I should have mentioned that in A Few Acres of Snow. Sorry, just taking some notes here. You all give me good stuff to think about in these chats. I'll do a quick recap before I do some more comments. I'll do a quick recap of what I talked about today in case anyone has questions coming in late. I talked about the charity thing that we're doing for Australia connected to the next Wingspan expansion. I talked about movies that I watched recently, The Hustle, Aeronauts, Game Changers, and Brittany Runs a Marathon. I talked about how I'm excited to play Isle of Cats tonight, and recently I played In the Hall of the Mountain King, Maracaibo, Cartographers, and Role Player. I talked about recent blogs about BackerKit launch and Return to the Dark Tower. I talked about Tug of War games. That was my Sunday sit-down video this past week. And I talked about how we're in the midst of Tapestry expansion playtesting. Those were at least my topics that I mentioned. Chad says that he recently played Clank in Space and he loved it. What do you like, if anything, about deck building games? Oh, I love deck building games. I love the variety. I love that feel of getting a new hand and figuring out how to best use that hand. Clank itself, not Clank in Space, but Clank, the original Clank, is one of my favorite deck building games because I love that you're not only doing something with your deck and having that sense of engine building and progression in your deck, but you're also choosing interesting paths throughout the game board itself and the variety the game board adds. So I like that combination of the deck itself and the game. But just that variety, that surprise of getting a really cool hand is that happens over and over again in a deck building game. I also love bag building games. And Chad, if you're interested, I have a whole video about deck building and bag building games. I did that fairly recently, maybe about a month ago. Gil says, have I ever played Blitz? Do I like real-time mechanisms? If they don't stress me out, I'm okay with real-time if it's not stressful. But I haven't played Blitz, no. Ian says, have I read any of the second trilogy in the Red Rising saga yet? And yes, I finished the fifth book. It took me a few months. It was a big book, but I finished it about a month or so ago. Asar says, what's the one thing that you cannot live without? Oxygen, water, food. Those are the main things, I think. Connor says, tell Jamie to man up and do a game with us. Who is this Joe? Which Joe are you talking about, Connor? Which Joe are you with right now? Are you at a convention? Who is Joe? Asar says, what makes me feel the most empowered? I think when I do something that I think makes someone else happy or brings someone else joy, that is very empowering for me. I'm I'm not saying that to sound selfless, because I do a lot of very selfish things, but that feels really good when I'm able to do something that kind of delights someone, that makes them happy, brings them joy. That I had the power to do that makes me feel really empowered. Sean says, "What is my decorating style?" It's pretty sparse. I mean, I have some bird pictures on the walls, a few things hung up here and there, but pretty much we have fairly empty walls. And I think we kind of like that. I think we like the sparse look here. Asar says, "What inspires me the most?" I don't know if there's something that jumps out on top, because I consume a lot of fiction. I watch movies, TV, books. Perhaps the most are other games. I'm as a game designer, game publisher, I'm inspired by other things that other designers have created. That's one of the reasons, other than loving to play games, that's one of the reasons I do play a lot of games by other designers and other publishers. Yeah. Asar says, "What's something that you're embarrassed you're so good at?" I don't know if there's. I think I'm good at a few different things, but I don't think I'm embarrassed by any of them that I can think of offhand. Rick says, "Let's say I've designed a super big sandbox game, but there are 40 plus resources, and it's obviously a heavy game, but it's not inaccessible or anything. It's still very playable." Let's say you have 40 plus resources is a lot, especially if there are tokens that go along with any of them. That's a lot. There can be games with lots of icons. Tapestry has lots of icons, but they kind of boil down to a few core icons and then others that you can sometimes look at, but you don't need to look at all that often. A Feast for Odin, I think, is a good example of a game with a lot of icons, but they make sense because they fit into different categories of icons. So you don't have to memorize every icon. You just have to know, okay, this icon is in this category. I think that can work. So I think it can work, but 40 plus is a lot, Rick. Carol mentioned that she has enjoyed Red Rising. Anyone who's looking for a good book, I always recommend Red Rising. I love that series. Rick's question is, "My issue is production. How can I lower production costs?" If you have tokens for all those icons, it's very difficult to lower production costs. But I don't think anyone would make a game that has 40 different actual physical tokens. It's just too many for the players and for production. Cody says, "Was there ever a time when you," and yeah, I'm thinking back to what I just said. I'm sure there's an exception to that rule, and feel free to mention it in the comments, but I think that's a general sentiment. Yeah, the closest I think there's Aura Labora has a number of resources, but still not that many, and it's still very fiddly because of the number of resources. I do love Aura Labora though. Okay, Cody says, "Was there ever a time when I was nervous or scared about the future of Stonemaier Games?" I'm constantly nervous and scared about the future of Stonemaier Games. Yeah, the future is so uncertain. I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, so constantly. Yeah, I don't live in fear, but it's always a little bit of a weight on my shoulders that I need to do the right thing for my audience and my company, and yeah, it's always on my mind. Ben says, "I'm designing my own board game, and I think it's pretty good." That's awesome. Ben, congrats on designing your own board game. He says, "I played it with all my friends and family, and will be sending it to some people that I found for blind playtesting soon." That's awesome. You're one step ahead of many designers there. "What is my next step if I want to sell it to an established board game company?" So my recommendation, I have some advice about this on my website under designing and publishing a tabletop game. But Ben, the basic answer is, I would recommend finding a few companies that publish similar games, but not really similar games. So like if you have a zombie cooperative game, don't go to Cool Mini or Not, because they already have a cooperative zombie game. But go to companies that have games that have a similar feel to your game, and companies that you admire, the types of companies that you'd want to work with, and look at their submission guidelines. And if they are accepting submissions, use those guidelines to submit the game to them. Asar says, "What am I excessively obsessive compulsive about, OCD about?" Not much. Maybe not anything. I'm really, there is actually a little thing. I don't like little repetitive sounds. Like if I can hear something dripping or beeping, that can drive me crazy. I don't know if that's OCD, but that really gets to me. Oh, Connor clarifies that Joe is his business partner. Okay, thank you for clarifying. I think I met Joe. Have I met Joe, Connor? I feel like I met someone that you work with at Gen Con a few years ago. Asar says, what's something that you enjoy doing that I never get tired of? Brainstorming is definitely one thing that's business related, but I love brainstorming. I never really get tired of that. Eating chocolate, never get tired of that. Cuddling with Megan, never get tired of that. Yeah, those are three. I'll stick with three. Chad says, do low luck games stress me out? For example, do I enjoy playing Puerto Rico? It's a very low luck game and it stresses me out like crazy. Why is that, Chad? Why does that stress you out? I guess every decision's on you then. No, I wouldn't say it stresses me out. I do like games that have a little bit of luck and variability, but I wouldn't say it stresses me out to not have luck. Ben says, it was really cool seeing so many of our games show up on the Dice Tower Top 100 lists. Congrats. Thank you. Yeah, I think someone mentioned last week that Tapestry showed up around like in the 50s somewhere. And then someone today mentioned that Scythe was number 1, Wingspan was number 3. So that's awesome. That's really, really cool. I'm glad people are, I make games so people can have fun with them. So that's really, that list is probably the main list that I should care about, because that is indicating that people are finding joy in playing our games. And that's awesome to me. Rafal says, and this is a question from his son Daniel, how expensive was it to produce and how much time did I spend designing Viticulture and Scythe? Let's see, expenses are tough to narrow down, Daniel. That's a good question. So you mentioned, you used the word produce. So to produce a copy of Scythe or Viticulture, I'm not going to give you the exact number, but an estimate that you can get is the general formula we use is 5 times the production cost is the MSRP, is the listed cost that you might see at a game store. And the reason for that is that when we sell a game to a distributor, they get a 60% discount. So if a game costs $10 to make, we're going to sell it to a distributor for $20 based on that formula, because then we have enough money to then reprint the game. We have that extra $10 that we can go back and reprint the game. With the first 10 pays for the game itself, the first copy, and then now the other $10 pays for another copy that we might print. So that's pretty much, that's the production cost. And how much time did I spend designing those games? Viticulture, I spent about a year designing it. Scythe also just about a year. With Scythe, that was almost my full-time job for a year, just designing Scythe. Gil says, how do I feel about Scythe being the People's Choice on Dice Tower 100, being the number 1 People's Choice on Dice Tower 100 games of all time? I'm kind of like what I just said. I'm just happy for people to have fun playing our games and for that to bring them joy and happiness. So it means a lot that we're accomplishing that goal. Yeah. Sean says, is there a good way to implement the balances into Tapestry? Is there a video for the changes? Sean, there's actually a little guide on our website. It's not really much that you have to do. There, for a few of the civilizations, there's a little boost or a little buff that they get at the beginning of the game. There's a form on our, there's just a one-page thing you can print off on our website. Go to the Tapestry page on our website and you can see it there. Donnie says, one of my fellow alumni from high school, Donnie says, have I noticed any trends in board gaming for 2020 yet? It's pretty early so far, Donnie. I don't know if this counts as a trend, but I did notice in the Hall of the Mountain King, they use those Tetris-style pieces, and those are also found in Isle of Cats, a game that I'm playing for the first time tonight. So 2 new games that use those pieces. I don't know if that's necessarily a trend because those pieces have been around for a while, but I think maybe it indicates to me that people are still enjoying that mechanism, that puzzly mechanism of those what is called polyomino pieces. In fact, I plan on doing a video about those pieces soon too. So maybe we'll find out if that's a trend. I guess if we look at Kickstarter, the games of Kickstarter are pretty different so far, so I don't know if there's necessarily a trend there. Max says, am I going to watch the Oscars? If so, what are some of your favorite movies competing for Best Picture? That's a great question. I love movies, but I actually don't really pay attention to the Oscars all that much. So I don't even know which movies are competing for Best Picture. And no, I won't be watching it. But I will be watching movies. Just not the Oscars. Chad says, what are the top bookmarks on my web browser? Which websites do I frequent the most? So I'll read them off my bookmarks bar. I have the Wizards of the Coast Magic the Gathering page. I have my own blog. I have Board Game Atlas. I have Board Game Geek, Facebook, ESPN, Feedly. That's the RSS feed that I use. YouTube, Shopify, Amazon, Basecamp. That's a project management software that we use. Our replacement parts link. Enough people have asked for that I just have a quick link for it. I have a few Google Docs for my company. I have a Discord channel that I use for my company, and I have a link to usually like the game that I'm actively discussing the most that I need to link to or look at the most. Right now it's the Wingspan expansion. And actually one that I recently added, this is a weird little inclusion, but there's a podcast called the Co-op Cast that I listen to every episode of. It's one of the few podcasts that I literally listen to every episode of. And so I put a link on my browser so that I can just click through every week and get their new episode. If you're into cooperative games, I highly, highly recommend the Co-op Cast. It's awesome. It's really, really great. Cody says, I'm sure this has been covered, but since I've been gone for so long, what did I think of The Witcher, Rise of Skywalker, and The Mandalorian? It's been across the board. I think I've enjoyed all of those works of fiction, Cody, recently. Rise of Skywalker, I was satisfied by the conclusion to the 9-movie series. Sure, I think there were certain things that could have been a little bit better. It made me kind of wish that the episode 8 was done as a standalone movie and not as part of the series. Overall, I really enjoyed it. The Witcher I found very confusing for a while, but then we got into it and we really enjoyed it. And The Mandalorian I absolutely loved. That's probably my favorite of those 3 if I had to rank them. Keith just joined us. Keith, I don't know if you probably, since you just joined us, you don't know this, but last week we kind of had a Thunderworks game evening without realizing it. I played Role Player, and immediately afterward we played Cartographers. So that was a lot of fun to pair those 2 games together. Cody says, have I ever played a game that I thought was interesting but didn't have fun playing it? Oh, yeah. A lot of games. Yeah. There are so many games that personally that I think are interesting but don't really have fun with. And I think there are games that are almost objectively just like functional. They're functional games, but they aren't fun. Not as many published games, but a lot of prototypes. We get a lot of prototypes we're like, oh, this is perfectly functional, but we are not having fun playing this. These are submissions that we get. And with my own prototypes too, there are plenty of prototypes that I have that aren't functional or are functional but aren't fun. And yeah, it's just part of the design process to find that fun. Gil says, are there plans to launch some Tapestry Civilization packs other than the expansions themselves? Probably not, Gil. I mean, yeah, I think they'll all be considered expansions when we release more civilizations. I guess it's possible. It'll still be an expansion, whatever it is, but I guess it is possible that there will be an expansion someday that is just more civilizations. Daniel says, with my background and desire to write a bit more down the road, fiction writing, what would be some topics or a world you'd like to explore? It's been a while since I thought about my fiction writing, but there was a world that I had started to create that I was really excited about that I left behind. It's the world that I wrote a novel in. It's not a new world, but it's a dystopian, slightly futuristic thing. So I wouldn't mind returning to that series at some point. Donnie says, about how many games do I currently own that I haven't played yet? Let me peek over here. I have a shelf of games like one small shelf that I haven't played yet. It's about down to 20. I'd say about 20 games that I haven't played. But I'm working through it. I'm actually making progress on it. Alexander says, what game for kids do I like the most? I think Animal Upon Animal was the first game that I introduced to my niece and nephew. That one works well. Yeah, I'll go with the first one that I said. Yeah, and Blockus. Blockus would probably be next. I think that one's a little bit too advanced for them at that time, but my niece now is almost 7, so I think she can easily play Blockus using the rules. But Animal Upon Animal, I think, is fun for an adult. It's light, silly fun, but it's still fun, and kids can make sense of it very easily. Connor says, have I ever gotten over feeling bad when I play a prototype isn't a match for me? I don't know if I really feel bad. I guess there are times where I'm like, oh, I wish we hadn't spent time playing this. But yeah, I get over it immediately because we're done playing it. Chad says, is the co-op cast the same as the one shop co-op shop? I'm looking it up. Yeah, so it's the same guys, but one is a YouTube channel called the One Stop Co-op Shop, and one is a podcast on SoundCloud called the Co-op Cast. Although no, it's also called One Stop Co-op Shop. I don't know why I call it the Co-op Cast. Yeah, so One Stop Co-op Shop is what I was referring to. That's the podcast. And it's one of those I would recommend going back and listening to older episodes because there's so much content. They've recorded so many great cooperative games. Yeah, it's awesome. Ryan says, do I have any role-playing board game recommendations? I just mentioned Role Player. Role Player is not a role-playing game, but it is what I want from a role-playing game, I think, in general. I have not played many role-playing games at all. So if you like the character building aspect and you like puzzles of role-playing games, I highly recommend Role Player. All right, it actually went a little bit over today, a little bit over 11 o'clock. You all gave me some great feedback about sandbox games to consider for an upcoming Sunday sit-down list. Thank you for doing that. And if you think of any later, the best place to post them is in the comments of this video on YouTube. I'm going to go post this video on YouTube now. So feel free to post them in the comments there. That's where I'll most likely see them. Facebook doesn't alert me to new comments on the video. So, yeah. Oh, Gil mentioned My Little Scythe is a game to play with little kids too. And I should have mentioned that. That is a game that we published that I think is a lot of fun to play with little kids. All right, everybody, have a great day. I will see you next Wednesday. Take care.